Okay, it's Thursday, July 21st, and here's what's going on in Ukraine. There's really not a pattern to what's going on here. That like sometimes it's very clear. Yesterday was all about politics. Other days it's all about, hey, they recaptured this or the Russians advanced here, but it's not like that. If anything, you're just seeing the war weariness of what's going on in Ukraine right now. Okay, so we're going to start here with the Institute for the Study of War. The current Russian occupational tempo is not markedly different from what it was during the week of July 7th to July 16th. That means there was kind of a pause. Missiles struck across the country in various places, but there wasn't a lot of ground that changed hands. Ukraine's main intelligence directorate reported that on July 21st, Russian troops have used 55 to 60% of Russia's pre-war reserve of high-precision missiles. Okay, there's another article I'll show you where they say half of their stock is gone, but that's half of Russia's stock, not their old Soviet stuff that they have sitting getting dusty in some basement somewhere. Now, their other stuff can blow people up and blow things up, but it's not precision. It's dumb munition, and so that changes things. It's not nearly as effective. Now, it might not change things as much for the Soviets, or sorry, for the Russians who are using Soviet material because they're also using Soviet tactics, just attacking a city and grinding it into the ground. And it doesn't really matter if it strikes this building or that building because it's all in the same city. So that's kind of how the Russians do warfare. It's not just attrition of people; it's attrition of they're willing to raise the entire city to the ground. Okay, Russian forces continued limited ground attacks with little success or limited success, and that's where we are today. Al Jazeera's list of key events on day 178. I want to highlight just a couple. CIA chief Bill Burns said the United States estimates that Russian casualties in the war so far have reached about 15,000 killed, perhaps 45,000 wounded. Now, that's far lower than Ukraine's estimate of 36, 37, maybe even 38,000 killed. I think the difference is that the US is only looking at Russian casualties, like Russia specific, not Russian casualties and contractors and DPR and LPR fighters on behalf of Russia. So I think that's what the difference is, but I'm not 100% positive. Nevertheless, 15,000 is the number of troops killed in 10 years in Afghanistan. The British came to the number 15,000 killed about a month ago, and so I think it's higher than that. I'm not positive. I'm not there, but it's probably a little bit higher than that. The U.S. number is fairly conservative. Several cities in Donetsk region were shelled and two schools were destroyed, but no real ground was taken. You'll also see, as we talk about this, other places where we're talking about like, hey, this city was shelled or this city had this other, a shellacking, whatever. Okay, Moscow installed officials in Ukraine's occupied southern city of Endahar started handing out Russian passports to residents. You're about to see another article that talks about the same kind of things. Okay, they're moving that direction. That's what's going to be happening next. Here is a article NBC News or the shelling. Let's talk about that. After the occupation, 900 times in Sumy and Cherniv. So after the occupation, after they pushed them out, the border guards still recorded 900 attacks, which Russians carry out mainly from mortars as well as barrel and rocket artillery, sometimes for hours at a time. So it's not like just because they don't control the real estate, they're not there. No, they're still harassing with 900 attacks since they've been pushed out. So that's what's going on. And this is just in these two small regions, Sumy and Cherniv. Okay, let me move on to this. Foreign soldiers flocked to Ukraine after Russia invaded. 5 months on, the fighting is taking a heavy toll. This is NBC News. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in the article. More than 50,000 nationalities from every continent are represented in the Legion, and that the former soldiers from the US and UK are the most common. That is the Foreign Legion soldiers from around the world that have flocked to Ukraine to join the Ukrainians to push the Russians out. The Transatlantic Dialogue Center, a Kiev-based think tank, estimated that more than 20,000 people have joined the International Legion. That's pretty impressive. Um, A little bit further, high mobility rocket systems or HIMARS are having some significant impact. The Pentagon now committed to send 4 more systems this past Tuesday. That brings the number up to 16. Now, Zelensky asked for 300. He hasn't gotten 300, but he's made remarkable use of the, I think, 8 or so, maybe even 12 now that are in country. Okay, and that's pretty much all I wanted to cover with this particular article. Okay, BBC News: Russia is about to run out of steam in the Ukraine, and I think if there's any theme here, it's just that it's ground down to it's just tired. On both sides are tired, but the Ukrainians have a certain momentum because it's their homes. They're defending their homes. If a robber broke into my home, he might be tired in the fight, but I would still fight until the last because my children are sleeping upstairs. So that's kind of the momentum that the Ukrainians have on their side. MI6 chief Richard Moore said at the Aspen Forum that the Russian gains were tiny and Russia was about to run out of steam, and that seems to be the kind of the consensus as you read the headlines. Our assessment is that Russians will increasingly find it difficult to find manpower and material over the next few weeks. They will have to pause in some way, and that will give the Ukrainians the opportunity to strike back. He said, "We're in for a tough time, a further reason to maintain support to help the Ukrainians win, or at least to negotiate from a position of significant strength, because China is watching us like a hawk." Now, we're going to talk about that in another article as well. But Zelensky talked about how in a number of his speeches, how like if this aggression isn't stopped here, it's going to spread. And he was talking about Russia spreading like through other parts of Europe or grabbing up other real estate. But there's another danger, and that is that other dictators like Putin are taking notice. China's watching because they want to take Taiwan. And then there are other dictators, perhaps some Middle Eastern dictators, that are looking at this kind of thing going, you know what, I'd like to grab that land over here, or I'd like to do this to whatever they're going to do. Here, this is an Al Jazeera article, "A Ukraine War, a Quagmire, Prompting the China to Rethink on Taiwan," says the CIA chief. Central Intelligence chief, now who I was quoting before was the MI6 chief from Britain. Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns said on Wednesday that China probably saw in Ukraine that quote, you don't achieve quick, decisive victories with underwhelming force. So they're taking notes, and Chinese are smart. They're paying attention. Speaking at the Aspen Security Forum, Burns said that China was unsettled when looking at Russia's 5-month-old war that was supposed to take a week, okay, which he characterized as a strategic failure for President Putin. Our sense is probably that it affects less the question of whether the Chinese leadership might choose some years down the road to use force to control Taiwan, but how and when they would do it. Now, he also said this: "I suspect that the lesson that the Chinese leadership and military are drawing is that you've got to amass overwhelming force." So I don't know that it has deterred China. It's at least backed them off for now as they're thinking about, hey, we can't do what Putin's doing because this isn't working so well. Now, this is an interesting article in Reuters. In occupied South Ukraine, some fear a return to Soviet times under Russia. Now, if you look at what they're doing, it does feel kind of eerily Soviet. I've not been in the Soviet Union during Soviet times. I've been to 4 former Soviet states, and you kind of get this weird buzz, but over time it keeps getting better. And but they're headlong moving the other direction. In Nova Kakhovka, a city in southern Ukraine, a statue of Russian communist leader Vladimir Lenin was erected in April in the city center, where the Russian and Soviet flags have been hoisted. Now, that's really interesting because the Ukrainians have gone through a process of desovietization. Removing all the Soviet era statues and things that were like, these huge Soviet monuments. And so putting this back was making quite a powerful statement. Okay, Russian installed authorities are seeking to bind the city and the surrounding Kherson region to Moscow. A Russian installed regional government plans to hold a referendum for Kherson, and I'm sure if it's anything like Crimea, they'll have overwhelming support of 97% of the population. No, nobody in the democratic world votes for anybody with 97%. That's the idea behind democracy. Like, we all get to have actual say. Um, he said that within weeks, the Russian telecommunications network will fully cover Kherson, and he hoped to have the Russian ruble in full circulation by early next year. That's not good. Kherson, home to 1 million people before the war, gives Russia land corridor from to its border in Crimea. So if they can control Kherson, they control this big swath over the Azov Sea all the way to Crimea. And so Russia really wants to hold this. Russia was laying the groundwork for annexation of Ukrainian territory, including via the introduction of the ruble and forced use of Russian passports. You want to work, you have to have a Russian passport, not a Ukrainian passport. A teacher was asked, who asked not to be identified, said the school's administration summoned the 20 remaining staff in May and asked who would be prepared to teach the Russian curriculum, and only 2 of them raised their hands. And she said, I love Ukraine. Why would I teach the kids differently? Can I tell them that the ones killing our people and our kids are doing a great job? My conscience won't let me do it. My soul hurts. They haven't returned us to Russia like they say. They sent us back to the USSR of 40 years ago. Wow. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on the ground. Okay, a couple other quick headlines. Lukashenko in Belarus says Ukraine must end this war, come to peace now while you can. Otherwise, you have the abyss of nuclear war ahead. We must stop and reach an agreement, end this mess. Okay, so there'll be more and more calls to end this mess, to have peace. The more that Russia feels like it's grabbed its land and feels like it has control, then they're going to say, we want peace. And these Ukrainians, they're bad. They keep attacking us. Well, that's because you took their stuff. President Zelensky said today Russia launched another fake news that the state is not controlled by President Zelensky since he is in the hospital, or rather in intensive care, due to a serious health condition. So I'm in the office. I'm as strong now as I ever, and I've never felt better myself. And the bad news is, for those who launch such fakes, is that I'm not alone. There are 40 million of us. I love the way that he phrases things. I mean, the guy's awesome. Okay. Let's see. UK sent lots more weapons, lots more weapons. So far, they've sent all this stuff to Ukraine, and I'm not going to belabor it, but they're sending more weapons, and the UK has been an incredible supporter of Ukraine. Russia, we already talked about this, but Russia already used up 50% of its stock of modern missiles, but I'm not sure how much that matters because they are plenty fine with just using dumb artillery to destroy cities. Okay, next article is more economics, right? Russia warns that it could stop oil exports. Now, this is an RT, that's Russian television. Russia will stop global exports if the West proposed price cap makes it unprofitable. Okay, so what's this Western proposed price cap? At the G7, the G7 leaders got together and said, you know what, we buy so much of their oil, and essentially the way that OPEC has worked, it's been a cartel. They set the price because they control all this stuff. Well, they're saying, you know, we the customers are such a large quantity of customers that we can actually say we're not buying over this amount. And as long as we hang together on that, it's hard. You have to at least sell it, lower the price, or you're not going to be able to sell it. Now, so it's interesting. It's kind of like a reverse cartel, a customer cartel. Okay, if these prices, which they're talking about, are lower than the cost of oil production, naturally, Russia will not ensure the supply of this oil to the world markets, which means that we simply will not work at a negative profit. This is the Deputy Prime Minister, Alexander Novak, telling the TASS, or telling Russians Channel 1, and it's cited in TASS. The G7 countries agreed to set a cap on the price of Russian oil at the end of June, an idea which had first been pitched by Washington as a means to limit Russia's income from energy exports. Okay, now why would they do that? Because Russian oil and gas, their energy exports is about a third of their budget. So the more money that they make from energy exports, the more they have to feed their war machine. So that's what's going on behind there. Only those raw materials and oil products whose value does not exceed the price cap would be allowed to be insured and transported. Right. So there is only a limited number of companies that will insure the tankers, and otherwise they don't go out to sell their oil. And so insuring them is half the battle of actually doing it. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida recently said that the upper threshold for the price cap would be set at about half the current market price of Russian oil. So it's yet to be seen how this will play out, because the West still wants their oil, but if they can band together, if the customers can collectively band together, they can actually push that price down. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. This is also significant. The National Bank of Ukraine has worsened its inflation outlook for 2022 to slightly more than 30% after a initial estimate of 20% in its previous forecast. That means that, for every dollar, hryvnia, I'm not sure how to pronounce their currency. Let's just use dollar. For every dollar you spend, you can only get the purchasing power of about 70 cents. That's what's happened to their purchasing power this year. So it's bad. Okay, that's all that I have for today. It is Thursday, July 21st, and I hope that that helps you understand what's going on and the context in Ukraine.